Okay, for our next presenter, it's John Hinton, who's going to give us some guidance on how to run a critique group for those of you who are missing the feedback, the necessary feedback for your words to grow. John?
Alrighty, so I was talking to Alice before we started today, and it's like talking about how critique tends to be a touchy subject because we are making ourselves vulnerable. So bear with me as we go through this. What is an actual critique group? Our local groups are great, but they kind of serve a different purpose. There's the camaraderie factor. There's the spawning of creativity when we share with other poets. There's also the cheerleading over our writing efforts, and those are all essential to the work that we do. And so I would tell you that a normal group is very familial. When you move into a critique group, it tends to be a bit more formal with a different bit of an outcome, because what you're trying to do there is deep dive your work. And often I like to equate it to this sentence: you're moving from approval to improval. When we get together in our groups, a lot of times that we're talking about getting everyone's approval for our work. And then when we talk about critique, we're talking about improving and how we're going to take it to the next step. People who engage in critique groups are like rose bushes, and they know they have to be pruned to grow. And so they go screaming with shears in their hand and say, "Here, cut me," because I know what it's going to take to grow is some hard truth. And that's a lot of times very difficult for people to get and accept, because we have to get out of our comfort zones. We're trying to raise our bar, and providing honest feedback is one of those things where we have to generally believe that each person that's in the critique group has our best interests at heart and helps us want to succeed. And that's a very strong trust relationship. We like to hear that our poems are great. We like to hear that we have a way with words, but we don't like to hear when somebody says that doesn't work for me, or critique hits hard. Criticism can hit very, very hard. So critique is not, "Hey, guess what? That poem stinks," or it's not, "Hey, this poem is absolutely perfect." That's not critique. The critique takes it to a different level. The important part of critique is that it's about the feedback for the work and not feedback about the author. And that is something that is hard to separate, where we live in a society where if you say that I've done a bad job, you're telling me I'm a bad person. And that is not the case. We're looking at strictly the work that we're doing, and we have to learn how to separate those things and accept that they're two entirely different entities. It's not about your talent. It's not about your worth. It's not about your potential as a writer. It's just that in this particular case, these are the things that we need to do to grow. So that being said, how do you kind of receive the feedback? Well, number one, you got to be humble. And then poetry is subjective. And Alice and I were talking about this. Just like all art is subjective. Nobody's going to like my style. Somebody's going to love my style. Same thing with yours. Somebody's going to love one of your paintings, one of your drawings, they're not, and then other people aren't. It's all subjective, and we have no reason to defend our work. Our work is our work. Our work is a byproduct of how we experience life, and nobody can judge us on that. So we can't be taking offense to people when they say, "Hey, this doesn't work for me," or "I don't like it." So we have to keep that in consideration. We take feedback, and the words glean or disregard. We have a choice about whether we take the feedback that we receive and use it for our benefit, or we disregard it. Do we disregard it because it's not effective? Maybe, maybe not. Do we disregard it because we don't like it? Probably, and that's the truth of the matter. But if you really want to grow, you have to listen to all opinions on what you're trying to communicate. And if you want to reach a broader audience, I think about how you structure a critique group. A lot of our groups, I don't know what the size of all your groups are, but like last stanza, it goes, 10, 15 people at a time. It's not the perfect size for a critique group. You want a critique group to be 4 to 6 people maximum, because you want to make sure that members both have the chance to give and receive feedback. And this is another place where it differs from your typical meeting groups, because a lot of times you have people come to your group who only share and don't give feedback, who only give feedback but don't share, or people who just come for the experience of being together in the community, which is perfectly fine. But that is not what you want in a critique group. Is you want people who are actively engaged on both sides of the role. You want them giving and receiving feedback so that there's a potential for growth exchange. And again, it's not easy because we're making ourselves vulnerable. And I actually said that, sorry. The other part about being in a critique group is that you always have work to share. It doesn't matter if it's imperfect, it doesn't matter if it's a first draft, but you always come to the group with something to share. I actually would tell you that when you want to start a critique group, you want the critique group to be people that aren't necessarily within your same circle already, because they're familiar with you, they know your style. And so there's this friendship, kinship thing that sometimes can stymie honest feedback. So a lot of times if you can cross group, or like I have a large Twitter presence, so I can have people on Twitter read my work. Anytime you can get a critique group that is outside the scope of your regular circle, it's going to enhance the effectiveness of it. But always have something to share. When it comes to how you structure critique groups, there's millions of ways, but and the guidelines are one of those things where it's kind of like a social contract. Your group gets together and you make a decision on what actually is relevant to you. You can put time limits on your critique group. You can put a limit on the number of pieces that can be shared. You can take turns during a meeting, or you can make meetings, for one person. You can do one person each week. If you were meeting weekly, you can do one person each week. And then you always want to have some time for rewrite and opportunity to put into practice what you're hearing from the feedback. So I would tell you, if you were in an in-person or a Zoom kind of critique group, the way you would kind of want to do this is, I'm going to read you my poem. And while I read my poem, you can listen to what's being read and make any particular notes on anything positive or negative that comes across. And then once you're done reading your poem, have somebody else read your poem as well. And then so it's kind of like a call and echo kind of thing. You've put your poem out there in your voice. Now let somebody else's voice put your poem out there to see if it sounds the same. You might be surprised, because inflection on words, where you pause, it changes the meaning of a poem sometimes more than the words that you use. Once those things have done, and you've made your notes, here's where I think it's a really important thing to do. You need to ask the question about how your work was perceived. You want to take ownership of the feedback and say, hey, I want to know how you feel about this piece. What worked for you? What didn't? As opposed to just putting the onus on the listener, you're actually taking charge of making your poem better by saying, hey, I used the word blue here, and I know I used the word blue three lines later. Should I have used cerulean? you know, what, this is the things that I didn't like about my poem, or I think I can improve. And then listen for the reactions that you get. If there's anything you question about your piece, you know, you want to express it and say, you know, I'm not sure if this worked. I don't know if this worked. And then allow for discussion. People will tell you, hey, I really liked this image that you created with this line, you know, or how about using a different word, like I said, with blue and cerulean. It gives you an opportunity to start to flesh out more of the fine details of a poem. And this is one of the things I think is critical. You don't want to change a style and substance of someone's poem, because those are the things that make that poem very personal to the author. But what you do want to do is chip off and smooth the rough edges. And so that's what we're trying to do in a critique group. A critique group should be a springboard for dialogue. Okay, you should be opening up yourself to more conversation about what your poem is saying, how it comes across to the reader. Is it coming across the way you want it to cross to the reader? And then with the knowledge, again, going back to the beginning, is not every poem is going to be liked by every person that reads it. It's just not going to happen. So we have to be open to that kind of, hey, I just don't like this poem. That's fine. You know, my wife's an expert at that. She tells me all the time, you know what? I just don't like that poem. And I tell her she doesn't know what she's talking about because she's not a poet. But, you know, so it's a great concept. I never thought of it that way before. These are the kind of things you can offer as feedback. And, you know, we don't want to just focus on, you know, I just don't think that's a very good poem, you know, or I don't like the subject matter, which, especially with me, with the style that I write, a lot of people do not like my subject matter. And that's okay. They don't have to, because sometimes we're writing for an audience, sometimes we're writing for ourselves, and sometimes we're writing just to express emotions. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there who will resonate with the emotions that we write, and will be maybe one person. But if it's one person, that's what's worth writing the poem for. What I thought I'd like to do is, I have a friend on Twitter who is a poet, and she was kind enough to say, hey, you could more than share my poem and critique it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to share her poem on the screen here, and I want you all to read it and then offer your critique on this particular poem.
Is she looking for any particular critique like you were talking about? Okay.
She is not looking for any critique at all. I asked her, I said, hey, I read this poem one day. I really liked it. I'd like to use it in my group because it's not from anybody in my group. And then let me pick it apart. And she thought that was a great idea. So here you go. So if you read that poem, what works for you, or what sticks out as either a positive or a negative? Is there anything you change about it, any word, without having the meaning of the poem changed?
I can't get it to shoot out.
Should we have someone read it out loud?
I'll be happy to.
Okay.
In the clash, bang, shrapnel of me exploding, pieces of me stuck in you. You walk on, but with a limp. Or how can you shake love that lives inside your bones?
First of all, I like the play on flashbang that she uses in the
Yeah, I do
first
too.
line. I think that's very effective.
I do too. I will give you a little background about her. She has some serious health problems, and she's facing mortality. And a lot of things that she writes are based from that viewpoint of, she knows that her end is coming sooner rather than later.
I love this poem. And the only change I would have put is that the last line where it says that lives inside your bones. I personally would have put rather than lives diffused inside your bones.
This is a good point, because this is one of the things that I wanted to change about this is that you said infused. I was saying embedded, that is embedded in your bones. And I, because, you know, when you think of shrapnel and what shrapnel does, you know, how that was one of the things, the changes I made. But anything else? Any other suggestions or anything? Yeah.
I have a little bit of discomfort in moving from line 1 to line 2. I'd like to have a little bit more explanation of what the clash bang was. I just feel like I have a little bit of a disjoint, but not
I hear you.
I love the rest of the poem. But I don't have a suggestion, so.
That's fine. But, you know,
or in the clash bang of the moment we shared, you know, just something, just a little bit more.
and see, this would be a good point. You don't always have to have a something to say, I don't know what to do about it, but you can just say, hey, I don't like this transition. There's something missing for me. And that allows the person that's writing the poem going, okay, well, what am I thinking in my head that I didn't put on paper?
I'm wondering if something just like in the clash bang of life, you know, so that puts, you know, into perspective, it's her life that she's talking about. So
very well could be. Absolutely.
I think it works fine, and because I see the shrapnel is the clash bang is just modifiers on shrapnel. So she's, and to me, it emphasizes the sudden sense of destructiveness that has become her as from that shrapnel, that whatever's happening is exploding, and then she says, then she kind of projects that to the other person. But I think the way the first line kind of is a bit disjointed, Rachel, from the second line, to me that kind of emphasizes the
effect of shrapnel.
Yeah, the explosion itself, you know, the whole nature of shrapnel is that we didn't expect it to happen, and here it is.
And see, this is a very good point too, because Rachel sees it as missing something, and you see it as yes, I get that picture. And this is what happens within most of our writing, because we see things from different perspectives. I would say if you've been in any kind of military conflict where you experience shrapnel, this would resonate with you like with no problem at all. Whereas if you know, you lived as a cloistered nun, this is not going to make any sense. But you know, we each come to a piece from a different perspective and different life experiences. So what we can like about it and what we do like about it, don't like about it, you know, whether it's just that visual imagery or the use of a word in the last line like infused or embedded, these are the things that we can offer back as feedback. And as authors, then we have a choice in going, okay, yes, I'd like to make that more clear, or no, I like the subtle hint of what I'm trying to say versus overtly saying it. So it's just one of those things. Anything else on this piece that anybody wants to throw out?
I would say that in the clash bang of, have like another sentence of, like, say, of life's anxious moments, you know, just one little sentence, you know, like that, life's or whatever, maybe anxious is not the word, in the clash bang of life's anxious moments. I just threw that out there, shrapnel, you know, so it gives you a little bit of a,
you know, we could go in the clash bang of heartbreak.
Or heartbreak, that's fine, yeah.
You know, or, you know.
I didn't catch what you said about her. I didn't hear that.
she has a health crisis
Okay,
that is looming, and that she is a little bit. She's not very old. She's in her 40s, but facing mortality sooner than most of us will. And
right,
so a lot of her work reflects the
right.
her views on the time that she has left in relationships and the depth of relationships.
It could be of heartbreaking moments. I mean, I don't know, just of something maybe.
Mm-hmm.
John,
Mm-hmm.
could I think for me, I didn't have a problem with the first part at all because of the punctuation involved.
Okay.
I didn't, and I have a feeling, can I read it out loud the way I hear it?
Absolutely.
Okay. In the clash, bang, shrapnel of me exploding, pieces of me stuck in you. You walk on, but with a limp. For how can you shake love that lives inside your bones? To me, that works with the first line, you know, and it's like the comma gives it a place, you know, in the
What if I did
clash.
this? What if I did that?
That would be up to her, but I mean, it works for me because
No, right.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I hear it. I hear it more as the emphasis is on, you know, in the clash, bang. And
There you
then
go.
another thought, the next thought is shrapnel of me, exploding pieces of me stuck in you. You walk on, but with a limp. For how can you shake love that lives inside your bones? And on the version you sent me, bones had a question mark after it, just so you know. It was actually ending with a question mark. And I like the two alterations you guys made from inside your bones to infused, embedded, and then for me, just saying lives in your bones would have been enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that internalizes it
Absolutely.
simply. It's a
Yep.
simple internalization. So that was really my only critique, was to change inside just to in.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the poem with the ending having that question mark, especially since you gave us some insight into where she's coming from.
Right.
That this is a questioning poem, a questioning moment in her life. So that would be all I would suggest.
It's fun, isn't it? It's
It
fun to
is.
give.
It's
Yeah.
really great.
And
Yeah.
I
You
would
know,
say,
Go ahead.
I would say in that last line, if you're going to change lives or inside or whatever, but if you're going to, I'm thinking in terms of the ideas for infused or embedded. If you use those nouns converted to verbs, I think that should be thrown away. You say, can you shake love embedded in, and then it just goes in your bones.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I can see that.
Or even to borrow Alice's idea, embedded into your bones, but
No, just
I would
in.
just say
Just
embedded in your bones. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
that becomes pretty superfluous.
I think I have a feeling, and I could be completely wrong, but given her situation, the word lives, I think, is very important for her in that line.
I would not
And
disagree with that at all.
so I would think leave that lives, you know, how can you shake love that lives in your bones is a simple punch, pure, you know, question. I love, this is great. Please tell her that I think as a person with lifelong health problems that stared death down several times, let me tell you, this poem speaks to me. It really does. And
How
please
about
He does.
convey that to her for me, because
Absolutely.
How about changing that lives into still living?
that changes the thought enough that she might, you know, I mean, I get where you're coming from. It's
Absolutely.
you know, but that does
see-
kind of change her question.
And this is the point where you're sitting in a critique group, and this is the very dialogue you want to have.
Mhm.
And as the writer, you know, you're listening to all this feedback about your very personal poem, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to meter out and weigh all these suggestions about do they make my piece better? Do they keep my piece with the same style and substance? And so this is exactly what you do inside the critique group, but you have to have that honesty and trust. And it's got to be two-way, where people are willing to give and equally receive the feedback, or critique doesn't work.
Right.
Okay. And so this is a perfect example. You all, thank you for weighing in exactly the way you did, because this is exactly how you would envision a critique conversation going, as opposed to a lot of times just saying, oh, hey, I really love that piece, and then letting it go at that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that kind of wraps up what I have to say about critique group.
Good
have any-
comments too, by
Any
the way.
questions at all? I mean, but,
I would like to ask a question of you.
mhm.
And this is a follow-up thing that you can, think about, and we can talk about at a later time. But, you had mentioned that a good group size is 4 to 6 people. So you don't have to answer now because of time and everything, but I'm wondering how you think structuring that. How do you know like who to invite, or is it by invitation? Is it, what would work best for PSI, for example, if we wanted to start a monthly critique Zoom event or something like that?
Absolutely.
Just think on that and let us know what you think about that. I'm
Absolutely.
gonna mute myself now because I'm
Oh,
not.
will do.
Okay.
All right. That's
Awesome.
me.
Yay.
Thank you so much, John. That was very, very good. It gives us a lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
And makes a couple more things on the agenda for things to consider for the future.